Dear respected Thai, dear brothers and sisters, today is the 8th of December in 2021, and we're on the 26th tenet in the 40 tenets of Plum village. The Sangha body the Buddha body and the Dharma body. Interare. In a true Sangha, you can find the true Buddha, and the true Dharma. So, when we talk about the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, we usually call it the three jewels, and that, or the three refuges. So, whenever we suffer, we can take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. And this is very helpful because maybe wherever we are in our life and we are suffering, we look and it seems like even the people around us are causing our suffering. And we always have the three jewels in our heart. These three places, these three refuges. We can take refuge in the Buddha. It means the Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha, but also it means the quality or the nature of awakening that is in our body, in our mind. So when you are sad, angry, overwhelmed by fear, you can take refuge in the Buddha in your heart. And that's very, very helpful, and I do it very often. When I don't, and I'm in a situation and I don't know what to do, and my thinking mind cannot get out of the situation. I just go for refuge in the Buddha. And I know that in my heart is the capacity to learn how to dwell happily in the present moment. And right away I touch joy. And the more that I practice it, the easier it is for me to access that joy. So at first we might think, well, that's just a bunch of words going for refuge in the Buddha. But the more we sit in mindfulness, we walk in mindfulness, we breathe in mindfulness, somehow we see that it's there. We can touch it with our breath, with our step. And it feels like a light emanating from within. It's very warm, and know that it's very pleasant to sit near my teacher, Thai. It doesn't feel like there's anything to fear, not even death. It just feels so lovely, and you want it to go as long as possible. Whenever I was with Thai, whether by myself or with others, it just feels so pleasant. Everything feels calm and at ease, and all the problems that I might have had coming into the room just kind of disappear. They're just not important. It's just my thinking mind. And I think that's a sign of a real Zen master. It's not that they hit you with a stick. It's that when you're near them, you feel free, more free. You feel at ease. You feel free from fear. With time, with the practice, you are able to touch that in your own heart. And that's going for refuge in the Buddha. It's also going for refuge in the Dhamma, because the Buddha is not separate from the Dharma. So the one who walks the path is not separate from the path itself. They are one. And so Thai is saying they interare. So the Buddha body and the Dhamma body interare. And he adds the Sangha body. So the Sangha is one of the three jewels. We go for refuge in the Sangha. But in Buddhist teaching, it was in Plum village that Thai started talking about the Sangha body. So Sangha Kaya. Kaya is a body, so we have Buddha Kaya. Yeah, it's Dhamma Kaya. And in Plum village we add the Sangha Kaya. So taking refuge in the Dhamma, we right away come back to the practice. So if we're agitated or worried, we come back to the breath. Come back to the contact our feet make with the earth. Come back to our breathing. Come back to the wonders of the present moment and let go of whatever our worry or anxiety is. So that's taking refuge in the Dhamma Kaya. The Dhamma, the jewel of the Dhamma. But some people find this one a little bit more difficult. Because we can have the pure Buddha in our heart, the pure Dhamma, but the Sangha includes the community around us. And when we are angry with someone, or we see that the community we feel is not practicing very wholeheartedly, and then the shine on the Sangha seems a little bit diminished. And Thai told a story about one Vietnamese man who's very, very knowledgeable about Buddhism. And he studied all the sutras and Abhidharma, and he could answer any questions. But he was not happy with the way the monks were practicing that he knew. And so he declared, he said, I take refuge in the Buddha and the Dhamma, but I cannot take refuge in the Sangha. So he wanted to kind of excise the Sangha from the three jewels. So when we're suffering and we look around and we see what we don't like, then we think, I just want to cut it off, separate myself from it. And so Thai Tai told that story, and Tai said, a true Sangha doesn't have to be perfect. Because the true Sangha also has the profane. It has the sacred, and it also has the profane. It has everything. So there are qualities in the Sangha when we look around and we feel, oh, why does the Sangha do that? Why does the Sangha do this? But if we really take refuge in the Buddha, we know that that is also to take refuge in the Dhamma and the Sangha. Just like taking refuge in the Sangha is also to take refuge in the Buddha and the Dhamma. They interare. So to take refuge in a community means to take refuge in the Buddha. And this is what Tai meant when he said that there's nothing higher than brotherhood and sisterhood. If Buddhism is breaking the brotherhood and sisterhood, then we have to let go of Buddhism. Or siblinghood, right? It means that the harmony, that is the highest. And if we're not careful, we can grab Buddhism by the horns and try to make it our own possession. And our way of grasping onto Buddhism is not correct. It's not in the spirit of the teachings. And we use it like a blade to cut and to fight and to win arguments. But we don't live in harmony with our brothers and sisters. We don't listen when they shine light on us and our practice. So if we really want to take refuge in the Buddha, then it means we also have to take refuge in the Dhamma and the Sangha. These bodies interare. So Tai said the three jewels are these three bodies. They are kind of body. Like we already learned about many kinds of bodies a few weeks ago. And we talked about the Buddha body and the Dhamma body, and we also talked about the Sangha body. So Tai is presenting them in just these three as the three jewels, as looking at them as bodies as well. So we have this flesh body, but in our person, there's also these three elements. And so our practice is not to think of the Buddha as something outside, right, on the altar, or even when we look at the monks and nuns or lay friends who practice very beautifully, then we might think, oh, they are such a wonderful practitioner. Why can't I be like that? And so that is externalizing our happiness. You think, oh, if I can just be like that person. So it's very helpful to be together as a Sangha with brothers and sisters, but we don't look with the eyes of jealousy towards someone in their practice. Everyone is on their path. You know, some of us take a long time, some of us go very quickly, and then maybe a long plateau, and then quickly again. And it doesn't mean that anyone's better or worse. Someone might be very perfectly practicing fine manners, mindfulness on the surface, but inside there's a lot of agitation, worry. They cannot sleep at night. So it's so important that the practice go deep into every aspect of our experience of the present moment, and we look for the Buddha within ourselves. That is where we find stability and freedom. It's seeing inspiring friends on the path that's helping us to know, okay, I want to be. It's like Master Guishan said, it's like you walk through a field, and you just the dew on the grass blades saturate the hem of your robe. So living in the Sangha is like that. You're surrounded by brothers and sisters. They have a common practice, and we walk together, we live together, we eat together, And just slowly the dew penetrates. So it's not that we're jealous of the dew, or we try to usually we just want to jump in the deep end of the water and get totally immersed. Like, I want total enlightenment right away, as soon as possible. But the reality is that the path, sometimes we get a big awakening, but that's like a North Star showing us the way. It's not a final awakening. That's showing us this is the way. When I was a young lay practitioner, I went on a retreat in Providence, Rhode Island, Providence Zen Center. And I had a difficult relationship with kind of teacher that I was at the Zen Center in New Haven, and so we had a kind of argument. So then the Sangha there decided, okay, I don't know if it was a punishment, but they said, okay, we're going to send you to the main Zen Center for a 1-week retreat. And I was so happy. I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to go on a 1-week retreat. And we, in that tradition, we did something like 9 hours of sitting every day. Tamara was there, so she knows. We used to practice in that tradition. And it was, so I didn't, in every half an hour session, it was a half an hour sitting, and then you did walking around the hall, and then you did another half an hour sitting. And we used to have if you were having trouble, like pain in your knees, you wanted to stand up, you would bow, and then you would just stand behind your cushion and do kind of standing meditation. So it was very, very aware that we don't want to try to harm our body. But I was so determined. I was like, actually, the Zen master there, we can get caught in spiritual athleticism if we're not careful. And I used to be an athlete, so I had that mindset. So I'm like, okay, get total enlightenment this week. and so I refused to stand up, and after maybe 3 days, my knees were so sore. It was so painful because I hadn't, to sit something like 9 hours every day. If you add up all the half hours, it was 9 hours maybe. 6-7 hours at least, something like that. And we also, not only the sitting, but also the eating we did in the hall. So it was kind of more intensive Zen. And I was in a lot of pain, but my anger, my difficult relationship with that teacher, and all these things, my suffering were there, and I was just determined to sit, to go through the pain. And I remember there was a longer break, I think, I can't remember, maybe after dinner, before the evening sitting meditation. And I was able to go for a long walk at that time through the woods in the dark. And I really like walking in the forest in the dark. And I remember on maybe the 4th day of that week, or 5th day, I went very far, and I ended up at this road in the dark, and it just suddenly, everything broke open, and I just had no more sense of self at all. There was no this person with that name and this place. It was just totally open. I felt just completely free from suffering, free from everything. Just like, this is it. I was convinced. Actually, I didn't have any conceptual thinking in that moment, but it just felt so amazing. But of course, then I came back, and that didn't last forever. That moment passed. And if I didn't have good teachers who were on the path already, I might get a wrong perception about that experience and think that, oh, I'm now enlightened. And unfortunately, some people who have these deep experiences from the practice, end up and they don't have wise friends around them that can kind of like bring you back down to earth. And you still have anger, you still have jealousy, you still have suffering, and help you to see that this is a path. There can be moments of boom, but those are so beautiful. We should honor that. But we don't mistake it and get caught in our habits of wanting power or recognition or something like that. Right? This is not the purpose of a spiritual path. We are what we call a kalyana mitra. Good spiritual friends. And this is very much the spirit of the Plum Village practice. It's a lot of wisdom. Even the Buddha considered himself Kalyana Mitra. He's a friend on the path to help us teach. He's not trying to get power or authority. And of course, there are those who can help many people in their way of teaching, the way of walking, embracing their emotions. And so naturally many people come around them and then want to be near them. But if we are not careful and really solid in our practice, then that situation can become dangerous. So that is the spirit of Plum Village practice, is that we live together as a Sangha to avoid that situation. And so that we can really, because we know that we also make mistakes. So the Sangha is, I know it has happened in our Sangha as well, that some brothers, they get that thing, that moment, and then they think, that's it, But because we are very used to that in the Sangha, so we know how to take care of it. And and actually sometimes it could be a manifestation of even an imbalance, like a kind of mental illness. So we have to be careful. Yeah. So that is why we say enlightenment is in every a practice of every moment. It's not like pow, but it's really like, how has that person lived their life in every moment? How do they speak to their brothers and sisters? How do they look at one another? And are they able to receive input, or do they become irritable and angry when somebody shares something? So we're going into the time of shining light here in the Rains Retreat at Deer Park. So this coming week we'll start the shining light practice, and this is a beautiful practice where we actually share our perceptions about another person in their presence. So together with the community, we because we have our perceptions about one another. And in order to have a good circulation, we need to actually share what those perceptions are. We need to be courageous. So it means we share also the good things. We water the flowers. And then we also see there's compost that could get some transformation. So it can be good and nutritious soil for the beautiful flowers to grow. And we might give them some suggestions as well of how to go about transforming that compost. So those are usually the 3 areas. And we read a text before the shining light, which reminds us to see that brother or that sister as a beautiful flower in the Sangha. we are not separate from one another, so we use words to share our perceptions that can go in the direction of growing helping them to grow their practice and grow in their relationships with their brothers and sisters. And it's so fortunate that the lay community that's here for 3 months will also get to practice the shining light, because you really, I think, have to live together. I've heard of some sanghas that meet once a week, throughout the year, trying to practice shining light, and it's a little bit more difficult. I think it's difficult if you're not actually living together and like using the toilet together and having being roommates, eating together, because it's kind of embodied. If we just meet for Sangha, we put on kind of our best Sunday clothes for the Sangha meeting, and then we go home and then maybe we kick the dog, right? So it's a little bit more difficult to shine light if we're not living together. But because we all have been here for these past almost 2 months, coming up 2 months, so it's very precious to have the chance to receive shining light from others. It's kind of like a mirror for us. And usually I learn more about the person who is sharing their perception than I learn about the person who's receiving the shining light. When somebody shares, it's like, okay. You learn about the way they see the world. So it's a very lovely practice. And what it helps us to do is to help the Sangha to grow, to cultivate our practice. Cultivation is bhavana. Usually this is what the Sanskrit term we translate as meditation. And it actually, you could say it means cultivation, or we make manifest something that was not previously there. So we can, with the metaphor of the earth, we have the earth, and in the earth there are many seeds. And when we bring the right conditions of water and sunlight and nutritious soil and the air, then we can encourage those seeds to sprout and grow into a beautiful flower. And so this is the spirit of bhavana. So our meditation practice is to, for example, we might be someone we don't consider ourselves to be very joyful. Maybe we're very depressed. And so we look and we see, where is the joy? But we don't see that there's a seed of joy in the ground of our mind. And that if we practice mindful walking, mindful breathing, coming back to the present moment, then that joy can start to have a chance to sprout. It's because of our thinking that it just remains underneath. So allowing that joy, the seed of joy, to get watered by our practice of mindfulness. And we can also learn to help others water the seed of joy in the practice of shining light. You can listen to the bell. And so we can also cultivate these three bodies. We have the seed of a Buddha body, of the Dhamma body, of the Sangha body in our heart. And by practicing here at Deer Park or at home, we water the seed of that, of the Buddha body, of the Dhamma body, of the Sangha body, and we grow. We help them to grow, and this is how we become a community builder, a Sangha builder. It's one of the most difficult things, I think, that a human being can accomplish. The Buddha was a very skillful Sangha builder. He had a small Sangha. He lived in a few communities, and then he ended up with 5 disciples. And he was not satisfied with the practice in those former communities. So he went off on his own, and these 5 ascetics, they went with him. And he started to practice very severe practices, like not breathing for extended times, not eating for many days, for so long that he could, in the text it said he could touch his spine through his belly button. Yeah. He was so emaciated. But after a long time doing these practices, he realized this was not the way to awakening. And so he abandoned those practices and began to take food again. And because he could not was not able to transmit his insight of what he was doing to those 5 disciples, they decided to abandon him. He said, he's fallen away from the path. He's not a serious practitioner anymore. He's not eating just like one tiny bit of rice every day, like we are. So they lost their respect for the Buddha. This is for Gautama, before he became awakened. But that getting the strength of his body back, he was able to sit under the Bodhi tree and say, I will not stand up from this seat until I have penetrated the nature of suffering, finally. And he got the insight to interbeing. And he returned to, first he thought, well, those 2 teachers that I had in those 2 other communities, they will be able to understand what I've realized. But then he heard that they had recently passed away. And so instead he went back to that group of 5 and he began to teach them the Dhamma. And when he first came to them, they didn't want to offer him a seat. They wanted to say, okay, when the ascetic Gautama comes here, it's okay if he sits near us, but we will not offer him a seat and show him the respect that we showed him before, because he's abandoned the practice. But they could not resist. When he came close, they could not resist. Something inside of them impelled them to offer the best seat to the Buddha, because they felt something. They felt something had changed in him. And so then he said to them that he was no longer, do not call him a Gautama anymore. He is the Buddha. He is the awakened one. And they still had some doubt. And the Buddha said, is there any moment that you ever knew that I lied to you? That I told you something that was not true? And they said, no, that never happened. I said, please listen to what I have to teach. It is the Dhamma, which is the good in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. and he taught them, gave the first Dhamma talk to the 5 ascetics. And right away, one of the ascetics got the insight that the Buddha had touched. And from that time on, he was called Kondanya, the one who knows. It means they say the stainless eye of the Dhamma rose in Kondanya. And so he became the first member of the Sangha. And then slowly, over the next few days, the Buddha continued to teach. And 1 or 2 of them would go into the town for alms food, and then come back and share it with the others. And the Buddha would just teach the Dhamma, just continue teaching, until all 5 of them eventually had gotten the insight of the deathless, no birth, no death. And so that's how the Buddha began to build the Sangha. And then eventually a wealthy layman came by, and the Buddha also taught him, and he became a monk. And then slowly, eventually, the Buddha went to teach in another community of very famous spiritual teachers called the Kashyapa brothers, where they worshipped a kind of fire. Like they maintained a fire in a temple, and they believed that was by doing that they were getting merit. And the Buddha then taught the most senior Kashyapa brother, who eventually, although he for many days he felt he still was superior to the Buddha, he eventually realized the Buddha is better in every way. and he acknowledged the Buddha as his teacher. And then he was quite surprised when he turned to his disciples, because he had many hundreds of disciples, and he said, I, your teacher, I am now following the Buddha, the awakened one. You all can decide what you want to do. It is up to you. And they said, we were waiting so long for you to get that realization. We want to also become bhikshus and students of the Buddha. But the only reason we waited was because you are our teacher and you didn't get it yet. And there was a very funny scene when the Buddha went into Rajagriha, or now we call it Rajgir, in Bihar, where the Vulture's Peak is, in the bamboo grove. And the Buddha knew King Bimbisara, who was there, and he had met him earlier on his path, when he was just starting out in his path of practice. And the king was so impressed by the Buddha's practice, and he tried to offer half of his kingdom to the Buddha, but the Buddha said, I don't want to. I left all that behind. I don't want half of your kingdom. Sometimes I wonder, here at Deer Park, somebody comes up and says, some big corporate mogul, and he says, look, I love you. You have so much wisdom as a monk. I really admire your practice. I want you to be CEO of my company. I think you'll bring him in the direction of mindfulness, concentration, and insight, and we'll make even more money. And sometimes I wonder, I hope all my brothers would know what to do in that situation. Some of us, sometimes we are, in the Sangha, we are still pulled away. But the Buddha was very clear. He didn't want to be a king. But he went back as he had promised King Bimbisara that when he got the realization, the insight that he was looking for, he would come back to share the Dhamma with him. And so he came with, at this point, about 1,250 monks. From the majority of them from those spiritual communities of the 3 Kashyapa brothers. And so he came into Rajgir, and the people said, hide your sons. They heard the rumor that many young men, when they met the Buddha, they came back with bald heads and robes. And so the people said, please hide your sons. Don't let them meet the Buddha. So the Buddha came in, and And of course, the people in Rajgir, they knew the Uravela Kashyapa, the oldest Kashyapa brother, all three of the brothers. They're very well, I don't want to compare, but here in America we have like a spiritual circuit, and you have like very famous spiritual teachers. So it's kind of like that. Imagine like a very famous spiritual teacher who's been on Oprah and whatever, and suddenly like people were confused because they saw Uravela Kashyapa and they saw the Buddha, and they have no idea who the Buddha is. And they think, well, who should we honor? Who is the teacher and who is the student? They didn't know, because they know Uravela Kashyapa, but they don't know the Buddha. And so at that moment, Uravela Kashyapa, he took a fan and he started to fan the Buddha. And that was how people knew who the teacher was and who is the student. Very, very funny, a very funny moment. These are the things you can learn if you read the Vinaya in Buddhism, these stories of what happened. And King Bimbisara then offered the Buddha the bamboo grove, which is the first offering of land to the Sangha. Deer Park here is an offering to the Sangha. So even we are monks here and nuns, we don't own this land. We're just taking care of it on behalf of the Sangha in the 10 directions. When King Bimbisara wanted to offer the most beautiful park in Rajgir to the Buddha for the monks to stay in practice, he first said, I want to offer the bamboo grove to the Tathagata, which is another name for the Buddha. And the Buddha said, no, do not offer it to the Tathagata. Offer it to the Sangha in the 10 directions. And that became the precedent until now of offerings of land. Because the Buddha knew that the danger of offering it to a person, offering land, and he knew that the Sangha can continue, but this body will will cease, will go back to the earth, and then there may be confusion about this land that has been offered. And so he said, the Sangha, offer the land to the Sangha. And that is, until today, that is the precedent for land that is offered to the Buddha or the Dhamma. It goes to the Sangha. Maybe we can listen to a bell. So when we cultivate on the ground of our mind the Buddha body, this Dhamma body, and the Sangha body, they can manifest. And just like the Buddha, he got the insight of the Dhamma, he learned how to grow the Sangha body. If we grow the Buddha and the Dhamma in our heart, and they become strong, then quite naturally the Sangha body begins to grow. We don't have to do very much to become a Sangha builder. But as long as we just, it's only on the surface, we cannot really build the Sangha. So, building the Sangha body is not about organizing, making things efficient, making lots of money on retreats. That's not building the Sangha body. Of course we can do that, and then the community has more money, then we have more suffering. Because then people want they fight over what to use the money for. When the media mogul Modi in India came to Plum village to offer to buy the manuscript of Old Path White Clouds to make a movie, a Hollywood movie about the life of the Buddha based on Thay's book about the story of the Buddha. Thay refused $2 million. And one sister who was there, she said she felt like the ground shook when Thay did that. Thay said, whatever profit, you can make the movie, you don't need to pay for the manuscript. But you must take 1% of any profits you make and donate it to poor, hungry children in India. And I remember later that year, this was the next year, in 2007, and Thay was giving a talk in Saigon, in Vietnam. And Thay told that story of when being offered $2 million and refusing it. And Thay said, if we have $2 million in Plum Village, that will create more suffering for the community. People will fight over what to do with those $2 million. So he saw that right away, that money can make the community suffer. So don't be sure that money will bring happiness. Many people have a lot of money and they don't know what to do with it. It's a full-time job just to give away your money because you're afraid that it might be used inappropriately. And so then you want to manage the people you give it to, and then so it creates more work for yourself. So even you have money, it can make a lot of suffering. So don't think that because you don't have money, if you could only have money, that will bring happiness. It's a kind of, it carries with it a responsibility. So building the Sangha body, we do through our practice of generating the Buddha body, the Dhamma body. And so we generate the Buddha body, we also generate the Sangha body and the Dhamma body. We cultivate the Dhamma body, we're also cultivating the Sangha body and the Buddha body. And we build the Sangha body, we also build the Buddha body and the Dhamma body. And our way of doing that is just through our daily practice. It seems not exciting, but it's so joyful. I mean, it's just, living in the Sangha is the greatest blessing. I mean, every day I'm so thankful that I can live in a Sangha. That I wake up in the morning, I have my brother across the room from me, and I recite the Gatha. Waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours before me. I vow to live each moment in mindfulness and look at all beings with eyes of compassion. And and if there's any thinking, because sometimes if you're not careful in the morning, you can wake up with thoughts that are not so beautiful. I think it's because we have low blood sugar or something. But somehow we feel a little bit in the morning. I notice when I wake up, I can have some thought, and it's like, Usually some relationship is not going very well. And so then saying that Gatha is very helpful, because it changes your mind, your attitude. And then you see the Sangha. Sangha is there. I sit and drink tea with my brother every morning. And sometimes in silence, sometimes we share a little bit. And then I come down and the Sangha is all gathered here in the hall. And I don't have to do anything. They're all there. And I just sit down and I get the energy, the collective energy of mindfulness of the Sangha. It's so wonderful. So practicing gratitude is a way of building the Sangha body. Just showing up for the activities is a way of building the Sangha body. So what is the true Sangha? So Thai said that true Sangha doesn't have to be perfect. A true Sangha is a Sangha that's practicing. And if a Sangha is perfect, what would it need to practice? Right? So a true Sangha also has suffering and difficulties. And that's quite normal. But the difference is that we're practicing. That's what makes it a true Sangha. And so if we're wholehearted in our practice, we come to the activities, participate in Dhamma sharing, practice walking meditation, eating meditation, we are building the Sangha. Even we have afflictions, even we're beset by thinking that is harmful to ourselves and others, but we are practicing with it. We are wholehearted about that. That makes a true Sangha. And in that Sangha then there is the Buddha and the Dhamma as well. And that's very interesting. Because if we're not careful, we can start to think the Buddha is just somebody, we can have a lot of faith in the practice of the Buddha, and we heard the stories of the Buddha, but we can start to get thinking like, oh, but that was in the time when a Buddha manifested. Now we are in the age of the decline of the Dhamma, something like that. And we cannot possibly come even close to what the Buddha attained and all those arhats that were around the Buddha. If we're not careful, we can fall into that kind of wrong thinking. And actually many Buddhists, they started to think like that. They started to map out the timing of the Dhamma, and and they think, oh, we this now in our day, we have so much suffering, so all we can do is just chant the name of the Buddha, and that's the best we can do. And that's a kind of cop-out. It's not I think we're not being fair to the Buddha and the Dhamma that he taught, which is for us to practice, not to just to recite the name of the Buddha. It's very beautiful to recite the name of the Buddha. It can help us to remember his wonderful qualities. But if we think that that's all that there is there in the practice, it's not correct. The Buddha was very careful to teach. And until today, we receive that teaching. And it is very consistent, whether you receive it through the southern tradition, the northern tradition, whatever. We see that the teaching is very consistent. And so it's not fair to the Buddha, who was so careful to preserve the Dhamma for us to practice. If we just say that, oh, we're in the age of the decline of the Dhamma, and we cannot possibly realize what the Buddha realized. I feel it's not very nice to the Buddha. After he took such care to make sure that we could receive the Dhamma generation after generation. So when we see that these three interare, what's very interesting is that within the Sangha body, we can see the Buddha body. That's really interesting. So we have another poem or gatha that we practice, which is when we greet each other, we join our palms and we can bow to each other and we say silently, a lotus for you, a Buddha to be. So this is like a lotus flower, our hands join like this, and we bow to the other person. We see the Buddha to be in that person. So this is the practice of seeing the Buddha in the Sangha body. It's not theoretical. You see that, I see in each one of you a Buddha. So it means I don't obsess about your habits, your difficult qualities. Rather, I focus on the nature of awakening that is there in you. I see that the potential of a Shakyamuni Buddha is in you. Of course not Shakyamuni because you're not born into the Shakya clan. But there can be a California Buddha and Oakland Buddha, and Escondido Buddha, the hidden Buddha. Right? So in the future we can talk about many kinds of Buddhas. I said one Buddha is not enough. So looking in the true Sangha body that's practicing, we can see the Buddha. So we learn to see the Buddha in each one of us. Everyone in the Sangha. It's very lovely. I mean, isn't it lovely if you live in a Sangha of Buddhas? It's so pleasant. The Buddha taught about 4 fruits or attainments. And many of us may be familiar with them. There's a stream enterer, the one who has entered the stream of the Dhamma. It means that they can no longer go back to a state where you no longer take the Dhamma as your path. And then there's a once returner. It means you have to maybe the conditions are not sufficient in this lifetime, but you lay the seed for another manifestation to become a fully enlightened Buddha or a fully awakened Arhat. And then a non-returner, which will not have to come back again. And the last is the Arhat, which is the perfected one in this very lifetime. So Thai proposed the 4 fruits of the Plum Village practice, which is an updated version of these ancient 4 attainments. Because sometimes we can get caught in the idea of attainment, and that can be not helpful. We can start to think, oh, am I a stream enterer yet? Am I a once returner? Am I a non-returner? And this becomes a lot of thinking that can distract us. So the first fruit of the Plum Village practice is I have arrived, I am home. Like we have there on the altar. I first taught these right here in the Ocean of Peace Meditation Hall in 2004. And I was just a baby monk. I have arrived, I am home. It means we are at home in the Sangha. We're not restless. And I remember going on a retreat again back that same year that I told you about. And I decided to leave the Zen Center to go hiking on the Appalachian Trail. And there was a retreat just before I left with the Zen Master De Kwang. And I remember he knew that I was planning to leave the Zen Center, and his last talk in the retreat, he said, "Sometimes more suffering is necessary." I really appreciate that. That stuck in my head the whole time I was hiking on the Appalachian Trail, because it was right. There was more suffering that came up, and then I came back to the practice center. So sometimes when we start out, we're still restless. We're bouncing in and out of the Sangha. And so then we finally realize, okay, that this is not, going in and out of the Sangha is not is not helping me to be free. And that if I really want to overcome my habit energies, I need to stick to the Sangha, stay in the Sangha. That the transformation is not by going from one place to another, but it's by going inside ourselves. And in Vietnam, they have a saying Thai like to talk about, which is, if you put a frog on a plate, the frog will jump off the plate. And then you put it back on the plate and it jumps off the plate again. And it's a saying for someone who is very restless. And they say you can't seem to stay in one place. Stick to one thing. So the Thai gave this, the first attainment, a nickname, which is Froglessness. So we learn to attain the state of froglessness. We don't keep jumping off the plate. One time, another time, another time. You just stick to the Sangha. We suffer, we stick to the Sangha. We're happy, stick to the Sangha. Whatever it is, we stick to the Sangha. I noticed that because sometimes we go to gatherings with other Buddhist practitioners, and I see that whether somebody's in the Tibetan tradition, the Theravada tradition, Zen tradition, whatever tradition, it doesn't really matter what the tradition is, but they stick to that. Then that's really, you see a deep practice. Whether it's the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism, Theravada tradition of Buddhism, whatever it is, it means that when suffering came up, I didn't jump off the plate. I stayed, okay, because I know that it's not about the Sangha having a problem. There's something inside of me, and I need to look at that, and so I want to stay there and just hold that. Not change the outside conditions anymore, but I want to transform that. I mean, deeply, deeply want to transform it. That is froglessness, the first attainment of the Plum Village practice. The second one is dwelling happily in the present moment. Ian Phap Luu. Sometimes like dwelling peacefully and happily in the present moment. So we can stay without going, but can we learn how to dwell happily in the present moment? We might stick to the Sangha, but we just suffer and we make the Sangha suffer. So we need to learn how to generate happiness in every moment. I said a true practitioner is someone who knows how to generate a feeling of joy wherever they are, whenever. And I know in my own practice, I sometimes, when I hear that, then I'm like, oh, yes, I can do that, and I do, and I come back and I know how to generate joy. But sometimes I can go a whole day without practicing that. I can think, oh, I know how to do that, yeah, but now I'm going to do this. And I get caught up in something, and then I get irritated. And it's kind of like, you be careful in the practice. If you do something well in your practice, and then you go and you look for a reward. Like, it's kind of like you do your homework, you get an ice cream when you're a kid. And so you think, oh, okay, I did the practice. Now I can go eat a 10-course meal and just like gorge myself, or I can, I see sometimes from the time I was a kid and my parents would give me a reward when I did something, I have that psychology still in there. And so even I'm getting a lot of joy and happiness from the practice, but when I feel, that's really good sitting meditation session. It's like I want to go have a really strong coffee or something. There's some kind of tendency to want to have to cap it off with something, and usually there is a danger. That's where I lose my practice. So be careful about that. That's something I noticed in this. So dwelling happily in the present moment, that's already enough. You don't have to become a Dhamma teacher. You don't have to lead a retreat. You don't have to have a project. Just learning how to dwell happily in the present moment is already enough. And that is why when you come into Deer Park and you see the monks and nuns smiling all the time, this is what they're practicing. It's not that they're perfect, but they're practicing to dwell happily in the present moment. Whatever happens in the Sangha, you just learn to smile, breathe with it, let go. So the third attainment is interbeing. So not only that the Sangha body, the Buddha body, and the Dhamma body interare, but especially that we, our brother and sisters, they interare with us. They're not separate. So we get the insight that everyone around us is just a mirror to our own mind. And there's actually no separation. That's very profound. So we don't see ourselves as like this individual and that individual and this one. And why did he get to do that and I didn't get to do that? And the comparing and judging. This comparing and judging is usually cutting us off from the insight of interbeing. When we have this insight, then we no longer compare and judge one another. All we see is that, sometimes some people have certain habit energies which causes them to suffer and others to suffer. So we just kind of, again, we're walking through the meadow together, getting the dew on our sleeve. And slowly we become saturated by dew. And then the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha can manifest. It's the insight of interbeing. And then the last is no birth, no death. So when we see the leaf, we no longer see it as something that has been born and something that is dying. But we see that it's only when conditions are sufficient, the leaf manifests. And when conditions are no longer sufficient, it ceases to manifest. It does not go from being or non-being into being and being into non-being. That all this experience of the phenomenal world is just like the waves on the ocean. It doesn't realize that it has the nature of water. Whether it's up or down, it is still of the nature of water. So the insight of no birth, no death is like seeing that a cloud never dies, right? That a cloud becomes the rain, which becomes the river, which goes into the ocean, which becomes a cloud again. And that our entire phenomenal experience as human beings is just like that. And so if we grasp onto this body, feelings, and so forth, as me, myself, and mine, we will just continue to suffer. So the insight of no birth, no death helps us to break out of our fear of being born and dying. And we see this is just a manifestation. It's wonderful, and we can enjoy. I mean, that's a way to dwell happily in the present moment, because there's no longer grasping at this body, these feelings, and so forth. So by cultivating these four or we can say better, the four fruits of the Plum village practice. We build a true Sangha, which has the true Buddha and the true Dhamma, which are all connected. They're all interare. And
the Sangha body is a field of merit. So when we offer something to the Sangha, we get the benefit right away. And so that is why a lot of our life here, if you start to look at it, it's just giving and receiving. And you might like to pay attention this week in the Sangha, whether you're washing up or cooking or doing the working meditation or whatever. We're about to go into the holiday season. I think recently we had Hanukkah and now we have Christmas, and we maybe exchange presents. And so don't look at it as like, oh, I'm going to give this person a gift, but see what kind of gift you're giving to the Sangha. A gift given to the Sangha has so much merit because it's something that can support somebody on their practice, that can help them to grow, and that's helping to build the Sangha, and it's also helping to create a Sangha that is available for others. Just today, the Dhamma teachers agreed to do a teen camp in June. And that's a tradition we started back in, I think, 2006 or something like that, when I was just a novice here. And we would go down and camp with all the teens. And I think the first one only had like 30 teens. And I heard recently now it's as many as 200 teens. And when you just think about all of those young people getting exposure to the Dhamma, to the practice of mindfulness, and how much suffering can be averted in their lives by being able to learn about the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, you see that an offering made to the Sangha carries a lot of merit. It's not calculable how much merit it is. So in your giving to the Sangha, whether it's through service or gift or anything, even when I was a young practitioner and I still had school loans and I was just living kind of with a very low salary, whenever I could give money to the Buddhist community, I felt like it was the best thing I could do with that money, because there's so many ways of suffering that I could bring into my life by spending that money. And now you have even more, like Netflix and Amazon, and I mean, do we really need all these forms of cheap entertainment? I don't know. I mean, you ask yourself, is paying money for that subscription really bringing benefit? And I think when you look more deeply, you see that if you can offer something to the Sangha, it has benefit which you cannot calculate. It's something that because somehow the Sangha knows very well how to use it. It's always about building Sangha, growing the Dhamma body, the Buddha body, the Sangha body, whether it's through service, whether it's through your practice, whether it's through a donation. It's the beauty of the practice of giving. So please, in your practice, look around and see this great field of merit that is around us and within us in the Sangha body. So thank you for your practice. We'll finish with 3 sounds of the bell.